Hey everyone, welcome back to another lesson. Let's continue talking about for loops and let's get into more details to help you understand for loops a little bit better. Now, if you're so far a little bit confused or not sure about it, that's completely fine. As we go down and use this, you're going to see it more in action and hopefully you'll understand it. And as always, you can actually contact me for any questions that you have about these things. So with that being said, let's actually talk about for loops a little bit more. Specifically in this video, I want to talk about using if statements inside a for loop. Now, let's actually think about the way a for loop actually works. So if you remember, we had something like this in the previous video where we had a list of names or like numbers in that particular one, but the way we have it is that in a for loop, we define a new variable and we call this variable old variable, and essentially we run a command. This is essentially, if you think about the syntax, if you remember in the first or second video of this section, we talked about the syntax of it. This is your command, right? This is your code essentially. So no matter what happens when you call this for loop here, you run this based on whatever information you're receiving here. Again, that would be the names that you're pulling from this list, right? So this runs over and over. If you want to imagine it, this runs over and over like this. Obviously, that's not the correct syntax of it, but you get the idea, right? So if I run this, you're going to see names being pulled out of this list. So we got Sean, Kevin, Jake. So being pulled out of this. Very simple. And again, if you actually put it in Thunny, you will be able to see it as well in a much more clean way. Let me actually just put this here and let's actually take a look at it. So here we go. So if I run this and if I run our code here, we're gonna get the same thing, right? We get the names, list of names, and if we actually debug it and step into it, again, we'll see there's a list, the names inside each list, and then we got the whole list here. And let's step into it. Again, we come across the for loop, right? And then we saw the names. That's the variable we're calling, which is going to be right here. So if I again call these variables, that's going to be Sean, Kevin, name, Jake. That's going to be we're calling the list essentially, right? And then replaces it, Sean, and prints the Sean. There we go. And then does the same thing over and over again. It closes that statement and it goes back. It finds Kevin in that list, again prints Kevin again, and it finds Jake in that list and then prints Jake again, and then that would be the end of the program. Very simple. So again, one of the things you want to remember is that this is what we're calling, and this is the command based on what we got from the data we just called here, right? So you can actually do anything you want with this. This can be anything. It doesn't have to be a print. Obviously, the print is the most simplest way to actually show you something in the Python, but this can be anything. And in this particular video, I want to actually focus on showing you how would it work if you use an if statement. And again, very simple stuff, but let's actually make it a little bit more complicated, right? So let's actually define a new list. And we're going to give it numbers. So we're just gonna have a few numbers. Let's actually make him a little bit more, give him a little bit more variety. Here we go. All right, so we got a few numbers here. Cool. Yeah, I'm just making sure we're not repeating the same number here. So we got a few numbers, and I'm going to define start a new for loop. All right, so we're gonna say for, and then we're gonna say number. Right, that is the new variable in numbers, right? So that would be the variable, the list that we have here, right? So let's close this off, go to the next line, and we're going to actually do something interesting. So I want to run the same command over and over to make sure if any of these numbers are actually divisible by, let's say, 3. All right, so let's see. And or 2. Let's figure out if it's an odd number or an even number. So one of the things I can do is I can say if, again, this is how you use an if statement. As you see, it's indented under 4. That's very, very important to remember, right? I see if I go back and enter, it's going to be indented. That's very important. You don't want to use it like this, because if you do, that's going to be a completely separate thing from the for loop that you just created, right? Remember, indentation is everything in Python. So we're going to say if, that's going to be under the for loop. We're going to say if number, again, the number we're calling, not numbers, but the number we're calling, okay, is essentially the value that this for loop is going to pull out of this list. That's very important, right? If number, right, is divisible, you remember modulo, right? Divisible by 2, and that means if it's 0, right, and that if the remain is 0, we're going to say, and again, you can use a lot of other things. You can use and, you can use or if you want. Like, you can check for a lot of things, that because if it's an if statement, right? So you can do whatever you want with it. But in this case, I'm just going to keep it simple. If number is modulo 2 equals 0, that means it's divisible by 2. We're going to say print, and we're going to say f. We're going to make it an f statement. We're going to say number. And we're going to call this variable number. Here we go. Is, and again, we're calling this variable that was created for the loop statement, not this original list variable. That's very important to remember. All right. So if, and we're going to say, we're going to make it an if statement. Okay. If print essentially. And we're going to say number is an even number. So essentially, if it's divisible by 2 and remaining is 0, that means that if it's an even number, right? And we can say else print, make it an f statement, number. Let's actually just copy it instead of just typing this thing down. Odd number. All right. So essentially what we're saying is that using a for loop, we defined a variable, new variable called number, and we're pulling data from numbers, this list. We're saying that if this, variable that we just pulled based on this list is divisible by 2 and the remaining is 0, right? That's the modulo. You want to print number is an even number, and if it's not, you want to say this number is an odd number. So if I print this, what is going to happen is that it's going to essentially run this command, this if, a statement, if and else statement that we just created on every single item in that list. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 essentially lines of code being applied here, because again, it's a loop. Remember, right? It's a loop, meaning that it's going to run on every single item in this list. So let's actually run it and take a look at the results. Take a look. So we're going to say number 1, 2, 3 is an odd number. 2 and 2 is an even number, odd number, even number, odd number, all that. So just like that, we created a loop and we used if and else statements. So guys, I just wanted to kind of show you the concept of this. It's a pretty simple concept. Like, you can actually use anything you want in a for loop, and that's the whole point of it. But just be wary of the indentation. That's very important. So let me know if you have any questions. We're going to have a really fun practice in the next lesson, because I want you to kind of put this to use for yourself. But also you can, again, just code a little bit like this and, take a look at it for yourself and really put this to use and take a look at it. Code it a little bit, make your own lists, make your own loop statements, and just kind of put it to use. I'm also going to leave a link to this particular a replet file, so you can actually fork it for yourself and practice with it a little bit, so you can just understand these for loops a little bit better. Let me know if you have any questions. If not, I'll see you in the next lesson.